looking at the first game of the year and the things that you want to do offensively, is this just a question of people being so comfortable with what you guys are doing that you don't really have to tweak much? It's just a question of executing better what you have been the last few years?
Yes and no. I think you're always going to look to tweak and change and try to make yourself difficult to defend. Week to week, season to season. So I don't think that ever changes, whether it's week 1 or week 12.
JG was talking about just the environment that you're about to go into, and he said that it's going to be the team that makes the least amount of mistakes. When it comes to pre-snap penalties or making sure that with silent count that you're all on the same page, how much of that is something that you could actually work on in practice versus just having the discipline of doing it?
Something you work on all the time. We mix silent count and being on the voice in practice on a daily and weekly basis. The crowd noise is something you're always going to try to ramp up and put them in as close to the situation they're about to be in. Probably the hardest thing is the adrenaline of the game that you necessarily can't recreate. But I think from a noise standpoint, communication standpoint, making sure we're all getting off on the snap count, I think that's something you work on very regularly.
Your starters played a quarter in the preseason. So when it comes to week 1, regardless of the opponent, is there still a sense of uncertainty in what your offense can look like and will look like against a defense other than your own?
I'd like to think so from their perspective as much as ours, if that makes sense. Like I don't want them to know what we're going to be or who we're going to be or how we're going to do it at any point during the season. And I think at the beginning of every year, there is a little bit of uncertainty of, certain guys are going to step up. Unfortunately, the reality of the NFL, there's likely guys going to get hurt and other guys are going to emerge. So that's part of the business. And I think part of playing the position in any room in our building and being a coach that we need to adapt to those things to make sure that we take advantage of that uncertainty.
Do you guys keep track of pre-snap penalties in practice? And if so, is there punishment or anything you guys do to when they happen?
I'd say if it becomes a major problem, there are creative ways to bring it home and really drive the point home. I'd say generally speaking, no. Like guys have a ton of pride in their job. They know they don't want to make mistakes. They take a lot of pride in being right, especially in the pre-snap areas, which is something we like to think we control more often than not. So it's something we track all the time. We're always trying to keep track of different things that we're doing well and not as well, but not necessarily like we're running a lap or doing certain things. Those come and go, but for the most part, it's just the reality is we know that they hurt our ability to win, and if that's what we're going to be about, we have to eliminate them.
There's been conversations about the continuity on offense and how you guys, in OTAs and camp, you could have kind of higher level conversations to start. How long does that get to you to this point? Are you guys still having maybe higher level conversations at this point compared to the last couple of seasons?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you see when you get into the season now is because a lot of the plays that we're going to rep or we're going to dress up or do different ways, rather than talking necessarily about the play, we're talking a little bit more maybe about the defense or the scheme or what we're going to go against on their side of things. So you are getting a little bit more nuance from that standpoint. Whereas maybe the first time you put that play in or the third time you rep it, you're spending a little bit more time coaching the details of that play and not necessarily the look or the expectations of what might happen on the other side.
You've only, in your tenure here, you've only had Kyler for the one opener because obviously he wasn't around for the other one. But because he had a really nice start last year, a fast start. Like, does that give the offensive coordinator comfort knowing how that played out last year? And at that point, he hadn't even played in the preseason. Like, do you take some comfort out of that, or is it because it's a new year you just can't really?
I think it's more the second one. It's an unknown. I think he's the guy that I always expect to be ready regardless of situation. I mean, came back off the injury, having not played football in how many ever months, and jumped in there and looked really good. So that's not something I really think about a ton.
Let's talk about how he doesn't have any lingering effects from the knee injury for the first time since the knee injury. What can that unlock for him?
Probably a better question for him. I don't want to speak on his behalf on some of those things, but I think he's looked great out there. I think he's playing at a high level, operating the offense, making really good decisions. You saw the mobility last year, even though he didn't necessarily feel 100%. So I want that to continue.
What's your hope for his connection with Marv this year, year 2, compared to last year when they had a few?
My hope is that every single pass thrown his way will be completed for a touchdown, which would be historic, to say the least. No, I think at the end of the day, you always want to be getting better at the things you're trying to do. So whether that's a connection between a quarterback and a receiver, a tight end, a running back, something we're doing in the running game, you want to see growth. You want to see progress in anything you're doing. And I think that's always going to be true.
How has Elijah Higgins come along? What were some of the things you challenged him this offseason, and how has he been developing?
He's been great. I mean, I think Trey does a great job of trying to mentor him, and I think he works extremely hard at the job. He watches a ton of guys around the league. Didn't play tight end in college, right? So there's a lot of things that are new to him, or maybe he's doing not for the first time, but he hasn't had banked a ton of reps on throughout his career. And I think he's done a great job of embracing that and working at it because, again, we're limited in the amount of time that we may have with him on the field or in the meeting room. And he's taken a lot of that on himself to make sure he's making that progress, and you're seeing that improvement on the field.
At one point, Trey, months ago now, was talking about how he liked the sauce that you guys were trying to work into the offense. That's what he called it, the sauce. Do you feel like there's more sauce in this offense?
I don't know. I don't necessarily build a lot of other offenses, so it's hard for me to compare. I think when we talk about the sauce, to me, that's, we know things that we like to do or we're good at or we want to protect, and I think some of that sauce is just finding different ways to do those things and looking around the league at maybe a different formation or a different motion or putting people in different spots so that people aren't locked in on, we're always defending this when this happens or we really can take this away when this happens. I think that's a big part of being dynamic on offense, whether it's sauce or unpredictability. I like to think we have both those things.
With all the pre-snap motion, if you notice it not affecting a defense at all, like they're just not, do you scale back or you just kind of continue with what you're doing and just kind of go with it?
It's a mix. I think at the end of the day, if we don't feel like it's challenging the defense in any way, we don't generally want to do things just to do it. But there may be something we want to show that we may use down the line or something that really protects another concept. So there's always a balance in, I think, how much you do that stuff.
Do you think about like showing stuff further down the line in the middle of a game?
In the middle of a game, not at all. I think sometimes in the way that you dress up a concept, you motion a play because you know that it can be or do other things for you offensively, definitely takes part during the week. But on Sunday, it's strictly focused on what is going to give us the best chance to execute the play and go win.
Kellen Moore is an offensive-minded coach, was an OC a couple different places. And as silly as this might sound, because teams obviously have the offensive coordinator and they have the defensive coordinator, but the head coach has their fingerprints on everything. When you're watching film, are you able to tell from a team of, you can tell that the head coach maybe is a little more offensive-minded or defensive-minded, whether that's looking at their offense for inspiration or maybe how you can attack a defense, or not really just based on how the responsibilities kind of trickle down?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I like to think most head coach, I know ours does, is going to be involved in all three phases and have a big voice and an opinion because they've been around the league and they do the job at a high level, as Kellen does. I think when you're watching them, you may not necessarily notice unless it's really unique system or scheme or certain plays. I think it's more in terms of the conversations you're having with people around the league. You talk at the combine, you talk in the offseason, you're trying to figure out how people do different things, or players that move rosters. Who's driving the boat, what the language is, those type of things. But I don't think you necessarily see that on tape.
Do you need to, or do you pick Jonathan's brain when it comes to Brandon Staley because of how close they are and how well he knows him?
I pick his brain on anyone we're going to play on defense. That's something I think Jonathan is as good as anybody at. So just talking to him about the front structures, how they fit the run, what coverages they play, what are the rules, all the little nuances that go into that is something I'm talking to him about on a daily basis, really all season and in the offseason. He doesn't give me as much during the offseason when we're going against them, though.
How many plays do you tend to script to start a game? And then of those, do you sit with Kyler at some point during the week or weekend and then kind of go through it? Like, does he script them? Do you script them? How does that whole thing work?
I wouldn't say we necessarily script it like, hey, here's the order, here's exactly how it's going to come off. Because the first play may end up on the 5-yard line, it could be on the -2. The situation is very fluid. There's certainly rankings, and it's a very fluid conversation. Like, what do we like? What do I like? What do you like? What are we seeing well? What do we think look good during the week? What do we think lines up with who they're going to be? And I think you go into an idea with how you want to start a game from that standpoint, but it changes very quickly. Is, hey, they're playing a different coverage or a little bit different front structure, or we hit a play and we're in the red zone, we got to adapt to maybe what we want to do down there rather than what we thought was going to come up in midfield. So I think you go in with a very loose plan that is a collaborative effort from the staff, the players, the quarterback, and then it changes quickly as you get into the game.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Drew.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
the DJ component, obviously, he was a big part of special teams and in the return game. Now that you kind of maneuver off of that, kind of what's your thought process on going forward in the return game and just how that kind of changes up what you do, if any?
Yeah, well, I would say that decision makers make decisions, and however that shakes out, we've all got to react. We've had players, had a guy get hurt in pregame warm-up one time, late in the week, guy twists an ankle, whatever, on Friday. So you're always planning for contingencies, regardless of how you feel like the roster might shake out or whatever. We have some other guys who are candidates to do that. Depends who gets a jersey on game day, and we'll kind of work through that stuff as the week goes. But schematically, it doesn't necessarily change a lot. Depending on who's back there, we try to feature the skill set of the players, and whoever that ends up being, feel decent about, at least in week one, getting to what we need to get to.
In addition to DJ, just throughout free agency, a couple players the organization moved on from that had a lot of experience with special teams seem to be smaller but maybe faster this year in that unit. What are the strengths of your unit maybe as a whole this year?
Well, we're going to find out. Until the ball kicks off in week one, you don't really have a great idea on how that stuff meshes. Your group doesn't play. My group doesn't play together throughout the preseason. They might be out there for a couple of plays together. There's some guys that emerged, throughout the preseason, who might have roles on game day. So we're going to find out. I would say that, when you look at the roster composition, there's a couple less linebackers. We kept an extra safety. So just in terms of body type wise, our team speed should be something that shows up in a positive. But you still got to have enough bodies to do some of the other things that you need to be able to do. So there'll be some guys that maybe haven't had as much of a role in previous years and might have more of a role. Again, it all depends on who gets a jersey, and we haven't had all of those conversations yet. So whenever that gets settled, we'll kind of finalize some plans this week.
When you guys are deciding the 46, where does
48.
What's that?
48. Yep.
Where does your opinion factor into this? Do you and at what point do you kind of start to give your opinion, here's who I'd like up on game day?
Those are continuing conversations from the time the season ends the previous year, throughout free agency, throughout the draft. You're always trying to acquire your best players that you possibly can. So I would say that, I do have opinions about how I think we can function the best. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the best for our team. So it'd be hard for me to say how much my opinion weighs. They certainly hear it and say, hey, this is where I think this guy will play, or this is where I don't think this guy will play. And then, whenever those decisions sort themselves out, kind of react accordingly. I'd cite back to what I said at the beginning of this, like the contingency plans of things you have to be ready for. You have to be, okay, if one injury happens here, this is what we're doing. If two injuries go down, here's how we fix this. For a long time, when it was a 46-man roster, there was most teams kept 7 offensive linemen up on game day. The O-line coach was like, all right, what are we doing with 3 injuries? Is it a tight end? Is it a defensive tackle? Who are those guys? And that's just a part of the special teams coach's job, is to have ways to function regardless of what decisions get made or injuries might happen.
Is the process as you give a list of hey, here's who I want, or here's who I'd love? How does that work?
No, I mean, there's not a suggestion box. You just talk about stuff, and you're never going to go into a game with no backup quarterback, right? So that guy's got a jersey, and O-line, there's going to be an interior backup, there's going to be a tackle backup, and then where does that third guy factor in? And every position there is a minimum number of guys who have to be up in order to function on game day, and you're really working through. The maximum number would be however many guys you have in your 53 plus the 2 practice squad flexes that you might be able to utilize. Those have to be strategic in a given year. Flexing a guy up for have a minimum role, well, you might be looking for that guy to flex up in week 14. He doesn't have it because you've already burned in something that wasn't necessary. So, I mean, it's conversations by saying, here are the roles this guy will fill. And if he's not up, this is the guy that might be playing. And it might be another player that doesn't have necessarily a primary offense or defensive role. It might be somebody that's playing 50 snaps on their side of ball. So, you're trying to balance out the stress of the roster by, who can be up and not. Early on in the season, there's not a ton of chain reaction type things. When you start having injuries and, hey, there's 3 guys ruled out medically this week, you might have to get into some of those things. But, I would just say, it's just constant dialogue, and Wednesday's practice is going to factor. Thursday's practice is going to factor. A couple years ago, we had a linebacker that was going to play, and Friday's practice did not go well, and a different decision got made once we got to game day. So it's an ever-continuing conversation.
Joey Blunt was named as a captain. What value does having a special teams captain provide for a team, and what was your reaction when you heard that he got that honor?
Yeah, I'd first off say it wasn't named captain, he was voted captain. His teammates put him in that position, and Joey's been a good player for us since he got here. And, when you're the new guy at first, it's hard to kind of show some leadership. And now he's, in terms of like our group, he's one of the longest tenured guys that we have. I think Owen beats him out by 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but it's not. We don't like the guys who are backups. Like, there's a lot of young players on our roster, first, second, third-year players. There's not a ton of guys who are, that are playing special teams, 10, 12-year vets. So, Joey's emerged as a leader. I think it's been that way for the guys on the perimeter, like in the gunner room. They certainly look to him for some things, and the guys blocking the gunners. From a protection group, they don't really hear him involved in those things. But those same guys that are involved in our protection group are sharing spots with him on kickoff, right? They might be playing to his left or his right. So it's a cool honor. I think anytime your teammates, acknowledge that you're a good player and you do things the right way, I think that speaks volumes about players.
Speaking of vets on special teams, all the way through his career, even through the last couple of years, Calais has played a relatively significant amount of special team snaps. Is that a role that you still want to be able to use him in here?
Calais is a problem for other teams when he's on the field goal block team. He has really good length. He's got a good knack for it. He's moved around different places amongst the interior. We played him last year, and the first guy that I'm talking about was him. So it's like when guys have a history of those things, you certainly hope that history continues now that he's playing for us. Calais will not be on our kickoff team. But, last year he got his hands on a punt. It was defense stay, and he gives really good effort, and he ends up tipping it. It wasn't blocked because it didn't go backwards, but ends up being a really short punt. So, he was another guy that didn't surprise me that his teammates recognized him as a leader. But, hopefully Calais shows up, in a positive way for us throughout the year, at least on field goal block.
I talked to him recently about some of that stuff in his early career, and he made it very clear he was an elite special teamer once upon a time.
I don't remember seeing all of that tape, but field goal block, he's played a role there for a long time, even as a defensive player on the field goal protection unit. He's done well. We played him a number of times, and he's certainly somebody that you got to take account for.
Now that you've got a full year of the dynamic kickoff under your belt, obviously not the big picture changes, but in terms of the details, have you found that preparation was vastly different this year for you?
It's a good question. Different, no, because we're still looking at a ton of stuff. Different, yes, because I wasn't having to look up tape from other leagues that weren't playing by the exact same rules. We have constantly tried to stay the cutting edge is probably the wrong way to say it, but you're trying to look for trends and new things that come up, on a weekly basis. And if somebody does something good, we're just like any other team. We're going to look to hijack that idea and implement it into something that we do, no different than the offense and defensive stuff happens. It's the dynamic that enters the chat this year is the touchbacks going to the 35, you bang it out the back. So there was some alternative style of kicks that popped up in the preseason. I think there will be more. That changes, some of the timing aspects of what return teams can do. Not every kicker is great at it. Some better than others. And when the games start counting, it'll reveal itself over a couple of weeks on how people really feel about what they want to do.
I might be the only one who thinks this, but it seems to me like Chad has a bit more swagger this year. Is it important for a kicker to have a little bit? Obviously, confidence is important, but kind of have that swag to them at all.
I don't know what his swag rating would be. I agree with you that confidence certainly plays a part in all player performance stuff. The guy just shows up and does his job. And I think that when you have success, it breeds confidence, and that usually continues your success and helps in that regard. I probably just need to stay out of the swag rating.
Thanks, Coach.
Good. All right. Thank you. Yep.
No go. One movie over the course of, we had the long weekend. I got to watch it over, 3 days because I like to go to bed early. So it's like just chunk it away a little bit, 30 minutes here and there. I know. Life of a parent, terrible. Okay, football.
Kellen Moore was very complimentary of the defense that you and JG, he said Bill called it innovative, but he says it plays within rules, not within rules. There's lots of gray areas. Is he accurate at all as far as his description and breakdown?
Yeah, you could say there's some accuracy there. I mean, I definitely believe in you got to have rules and you got to be ruled out so you're not giving up explosive plays. But at the same time, I always encourage problem solving, and you want your players to play fast, play free. So I think it's a combination. I would say the feeling is very mutual with Kellen. I've had the privilege of being able to go up against him, as a position coach, as a quality control coach back in Minnesota, and I think he is phenomenal. One of the best play callers, very hard to get a beat on things. He does a great job of varying how he's calling a game, the tempo he uses, his candy package where he's, getting on the line and then he's talking to the quarterback because he can see what you're in. So they do a lot of good things. There's a good staff over there. They have a lot of formation variation things that you got to be able to rule out, and there's tackles getting split out wide, or it's, they got these wide splits. So he does a good job of, I call it like stealing yards. Like it's just so many things that you got to prepare for that they do a great job of mixing it in, and it just comes in these doses, and then he's out of it, and then by the time you figure it out, it's over.
So Big Pick, you want your defense to play fast and free, but then conversely, to what degree do you want the offense to think? Is that part of the objective as well? You want the offense you're going against to think?
Oh yeah, definitely. This game in general, I think like the faster you can play, the better you can play. And there's no question of when you get out there and things are moving and things don't look status quo, no matter what side of the ball you're on, it's hard. Like you can sit there, like if I'm in the film room and I have to rewind it a lot to be like, wait a minute, what is this? Good luck seeing it in live time and being able to apply it. So there's merit to that on both sides of the ball of, offenses can do it through formations and motions, and defenses can do it through shifts, and late stems and disguises and all that. So, it's definitely an advantage for either side.
With Kellen's play calling, what is the challenge, though, with his previous stops? He's had such different core styles of quarterback to what he has now. Like, how much can you take from what he's done in previous stops, knowing that he doesn't have the types of quarterbacks that he's had?
Well, I see a lot of good stuff from Rattler, to be honest. Yeah, they're different. Every quarterback's different. It's part of like the matrix of putting a plan together. In some ways you got to be able to take away concepts or plays or formations, and then in other ways it's who are the players we're playing against. And so you kind of have to mesh it. That's every single week. Like, yeah, I love this and this for what these guys do, but they also have this guy, and if they use him in this way, like if we try to do these things that take away the scheme, we're maybe in a bad position to take away a certain player. So, obviously Kellen been doing this for a long time, but with a new roster, things can look different. And I think one thing he does a really good job of is utilizing his personnel. So you got to be able to have a little bit of foresight into how is he going to utilize the quarterback with what the quarterback does well, but also they got a lot of good skill players, and so how are they going to utilize those guys as well? Maybe different than what he's had in the past.
How different of a game will Will Johnson see week one compared to what he saw preseason?
I think it's just a little bit more layers of detail as to what's to be expected. In some ways, for a guy that's as intelligent as he is, it's easier. Going out there and executing now, that's not necessarily easier, but I think that preparation process is something that he really loves. So I think he's going to feel really good about where he's at by the end of the week.
With the upgrade in defensive personnel, do you find yourself as you prepare for this first game and you game plan that it's different for you in terms of how you're approaching it with the different personnel?
I mean, yeah, like we got different pieces that we need to make sure that we utilize their skill set, but the philosophy is not different, and that's putting the guys in the best position to take away their best players or what they do best schematically.
What does jump off the page with Rallis?
He knows where to go with the ball, and when it's not there, he is elusive and can get out of trouble and can extend a run or extend a throw. So I'm impressed.
Mac went from a role change this offseason, calling the defense, to now he's voted captain. He's got this big position. What went into that ascent from last year to now to where he's one of the leaders in that locker room?
He's had it in him this whole time, honestly, and I think he is a natural leader, and I think when he stepped on the scene, he was himself, and that showed. But now, when you get into year 2 and your teammates aren't familiar with you, like it's very easy to really step into that role, and it was very clear to me that this guy is a leader of this team, leader of the defense. So, I think it's just a matter of, he found a spot here with the Cardinals that fits him, and he's been himself, and it's put him into that type of role.
With so many pass rushers, how it goes into deciding snap dispersal this week?
It can depend on the game plan, but also no matter whatever the game plan is, we'll be able to determine, what do we want this guy around, what do we want this guy around. We're not quite there yet. We're still working through that process, but kind of a combination of those two things.
Within the game, how much do you buy into, like, if a guy's on a hot streak, if he's just beating his guy? Like, do you...
Like NFL blitz? When they're on fire? Yeah.
Do you stick with him, or do you try to stick with your rules of, like, all right, this package is covered?
Well, I think if a guy, you're talking about pass rush specifically, like if he's winning, let him keep winning, but I don't necessarily think that means he shouldn't come out of the game. Like he's going to need that stamina, that juice to be able to go out there and throw his fastball. So, if a guy's, having a lot of success in a certain call, like come back to it.
With the rotation and getting time off, do the guys pretty much understand that, or are there conversations sometimes in the game where a guy's like, you got to let me be out there, whether it's with you or with the position coaches?
No, I think they're all on board with, they know that they got to be fresh, go out there and win. And when their number's called, go make it happen.
You talk so much about Calais off the field leadership and that. What about off the field? You haven't seen him in a game yet. Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense for kind of what his presence will change for your defense?
Yes and no, right? Like I have a really good idea of the player that he is, right? There's some years of tape on what he's done. I just haven't been on the sideline for it yet. So it'll come. I'm excited to see him go to work.
He said a couple times that he is good for like 35 plays. 40 might be a little. Like, do you? Like, you have to. I'm assuming you take that into account when you're deciding.
Yeah, that's every guy. Of what do we want him to get up to in terms of his max, and then you put the game plan together, and then you talk about how we're going to rotate throughout the game.
Is it weird coaching a player 7 years older than you?
He's like a father figure to me. What can I say? No, it's not. It's not. I've had players that are same age as me or older than me pretty much throughout my whole NFL career. And what I love about the NFL is it's a bunch of men working towards a common goal. And, there's a level of respect that I've always been around really good players, really good teammates. There's a level of respect that it really doesn't matter of, if he's older than me or if a guy's way younger than me. I was actually having this conversation with Keytrell the other day. They're just talking about some differences, of when they got into the NFL. He's like, I can't imagine calling you anything but Nick, and like, in the past, it's always been coach and yes, sir. So there's a level of respect of like, we're in this thing together, we're all accountable, and we're going to work with each other.
So there was no making fun of him on his birthday yesterday.
You'd have to ask the players that. He definitely got some old man comments, I think, when he broke the team down.
Year 3 for you as a DC, as a play caller. How different are you going into this third year? And are there obvious areas where you think you've evolved or changed?
Yeah, I think I talked about this a couple months back. I think maybe more of the biggest changes that I'm able to really kind of gauge is actually just what happens within the building on a day-to-day, and really making sure that I'm doing a good job of setting up the coaches to have success teaching the players. Because I just believe that in my role, if you try to be the one to teach the players everything, you can't do it. There's too much detail within each position. And so I really believe in how can I create this organization where when we walk out of that coaches meeting, all the details are so clear where they can go run with it and actually make it better. And so, that comes into like delegating and being very transparent to the why and clear of what we're doing, but then also open up those doors for creative process and allowing the coaches to put their spin on it. And so they'll come to me with all kinds of ideas, even as we're game planning right now, very much of a collaborative process. I need to fall back on those guys to utilize their ideas. So, in terms of like that is probably the biggest thing that I feel I've grown in terms of, how can I really utilize the brains of everybody else and make sure that I'm setting them up to go have success with the players, because players make it go. So how can we be the best teachers we can be in the classroom and on the grass to maximize them?
At what point did you start to look at the Saints or Kellen or whatnot? Was it like right when the schedule came out, or did you wait a little bit? Because you guys obviously been working on it for a long time. So.
Yeah. I have a process of once the schedule drops, I actually was working on, I was kind of getting anxious. So before the schedule dropped, I jumped ahead. And it happened to be a team that we play in December. So I was like, that was a waste. Not necessarily a waste, but that I can't wait for that in, 5 months, 6 months. And then, I'll look at the first handful of games, no matter what. So, the Saints kind of fell for me in the middle of the summer. But I'll generally look at the first anywhere from 4 to 7 opponents. And just because I believe like within a week of work, it's a lot. And it's dense, and you got to be able to really see things clear to have the right plan before you start kind of putting things in motion. You don't want to just do things to check the box. And so if I feel like I can get ahead on tape that's sitting there from 2024, 2023, whatever, during the summer, last spring, during training camp, in moments where I have, free, days where the players are off, I like to do that so that I have a good foundation coming in this week, so that I'm not here late and I'm still getting my sleep and I'm rested and I'm ready to give the players everything I got when they get in the building. So I love jumping ahead. I think it's a preference with each coach. I know some guys don't like it. I ultimately have to go back and watch it all again. But there's a foundation for me where I think I'm, one step ahead of what I would have normally been. So that's my process, long-winded answer. So I love all the time I can get. I wish the schedule dropped quicker. I'd try to get to all 17 games. I almost said 17 opponents, but it's not quite 17. Yeah.
You talk about someone like Garrett in particular, who really likes to prepare, watch a lot of film, and how over the years you guys have had to make sure he's not, watching too much film when he goes home later.
Coach Garrett.
Coach Garrett. Are you going to tell yourself the same thing as you have just this, first week and you're anxious for it to approach?
No, Garrett calls me a hypocrite, though. He does. He says, how come you tell me to take time off and I don't see you take time off? That was an off season, so I'm a hypocrite when it comes to Garrett. Coach Garrett was up there game planning with us the other day, so, he loves it. I don't try to hold him back during the season. He can watch as much as he wants. I just want him to occasionally take a week off in the off season. But I think the important thing for a guy like Garrett that's going to know everything is filtering out that information to, okay, within this down, within this situation, within this call, what do you need to know, broad focus before you snap your focus into a narrow focus. And he's done a really good job with that. And Garrett's not the only guy that's been a thing for us, is the guys that have a lot of intelligence, that want to take in a lot of information, filtering that information come time of the snap. And I think it allows them to play a little bit faster. So that's something we look at with guys that we feel like are highly intelligent, love the analytical process of preparing, of how do we narrow those focuses to really maximize between the snaps.
Is it common for players to join you in game plan?
I don't mind it, but no, it's not very common, no.
With Walt being out right now, what do you put on his plate to make sure that he's making the most out of this time from a mental perspective to kind of shorten that return window when he does?
Yeah, exactly. You know, it requires extra meeting time, you know, and really using different tools, not just, you know, giving information, but giving him ways where he can put himself in those positions mentally, visualization, you know, quizzes through the film of really test him on does he know what he's doing, so that when he gets out there, you know, it always takes repetition no matter what, because it's the processing of what's moving in front of me. But the more we can kind of chip away at that, as opposed to it's just not just always the basic day one install of giving him information, but really putting him through those quizzes. And that's for any guy who's, you know, currently not able to practice. It's preparing like you're a starter still, so that when that time comes, you're ready to roll.
I know he's at least 4 weeks away from coming back, but is that a position where you can kind of get someone on the field quicker, sooner rather than later, because of what they do, that you can kind of...
That's a question for medical professionals, definitely.
More from an X and O standpoint, like that's something like you can...
Oh, I got you. Mentally?
Yeah, like...
Yeah, every position might be different, you know, and every guy's probably different. It's probably a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Coach.
Appreciate you guys.
First 30.